The textbooks say Yorktown was George Washington's victory, but half the men in the trenches weren't American, and the fleet that trapped the British wasn't American at all. Yorktown was the turning point of the revolution, but its true story has been quietly deleted. They say history is written by the victors, but victories leave shadows, voices silenced, sacrifices forgotten, and stories deleted. Welcome to Deleted Histories. October 1781, Yorktown, Virginia. The siege that ended the American Revolution. The moment Cornwallis surrendered. The victory every schoolbook points to. But look closer. Behind Washington's triumph stood thousands of French soldiers storming the redoubts at bayonet point. Black regiments digging trenches through the night, fighting for a freedom many would never fully receive. A French fleet at Chesapeake Bay, locking the British inside, and a global war stretching from the Caribbean to Gibraltar, bleeding Britain's empire dry. Yorktown was Washington's triumph, but it was also the triumph of many who were nearly erased from memory. By 1781, Washington's army was exhausted. Desertions rose, pay was late, supplies scarce, but Washington's strength was persistence. For years he held the revolution together when everything seemed lost. And when French reinforcements finally arrived, he made his boldest gamble: leave New York, march south, and strike Cornwallis before Britain could recover. It was a risk, a Monty Python, but Washington trusted the alliance he had fought so hard to build. General Charles Cornwallis dug his men into Yorktown. He believed the Royal Navy would supply him or carry him to safety. But that faith collapsed when Admiral de Grasse's French fleet sailed from the Caribbean, blocking Chesapeake Bay. On September 5th, 1781, the French clashed with the British at the Battle of the Chesapeake. For hours, cannon smoke rolled across the sea. When the guns fell silent, the French held the bay. That single naval battle sealed Cornwallis's fate. With the British Navy driven off, Yorktown was trapped. Nearly 7,000 French soldiers stood with Washington at Yorktown. Almost half the Allied army. Their role was more than symbolic. Redoubt 9 was stormed by French grenadiers and chasseurs. They fought through musket fire, leapt into the trenches, and seized the position at bayonet point, suffering heavy casualties. Redoubt 10, stormed at the same time by American troops under Alexander Hamilton, was captured in minutes. Together these victories shattered Cornwallis's last defences. French artillery under Saint-Simon pounded the British lines day and night. Rochambeau commanded with Washington as an equal, coordinating troops and supplies. And Admiral de Grasse's fleet ensured Cornwallis could not escape. Washington's leadership held it all together, but France's soldiers and sailors gave Yorktown the strength to succeed. Among the Allied ranks were men fighting for something deeper than independence: freedom itself. The 1st Rhode Island Regiment, known as the Black Regiment, included free black men and formerly enslaved men promised liberty for their service. They dug trenches, manned defences, and faced the fire of battle. One observer wrote of them labouring through the night, building fortifications while cannonballs burst overhead. On the British side too, black men fought, drawn by King George's promise of freedom to any enslaved man who joined his ranks. At Yorktown they stood on opposite sides of the line, but all carried the same hope, that war might mean liberty. When it ended, many saw those hopes betrayed. Some were quietly re-enslaved in the new United States. Others, abandoned by the British, were forced back into bondage. Their courage was real, their sacrifices were vital, yet their names vanished from the victory story. Yorktown was not empty ground, it was a town filled with people. As cannon fire shook the earth, families huddled in cellars. Food ran short, sickness spread, children cried in the dark, and when the fighting ended, loyalist families, colonists who had sided with Britain, faced exile. Their homes seized, their voices erased from the new nation's memory. For them, Yorktown meant survival, but also loss. To understand Yorktown, you must look beyond Virginia. By 1781, Britain was fighting wars on every front: France in the Caribbean, Spain at Gibraltar, the Dutch on the seas. The Caribbean sugar islands consumed fleets and soldiers. Gibraltar tied down armies. The empire was bleeding everywhere at once. Yorktown was the final blow, but it was only possible because Britain was already stretched to breaking by a global conflict. America remembers it as a local struggle. In truth, it was part of the First Modern World War. On October 19th, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. He himself did not appear, claiming illness. His second-in-command handed over the sword. British troops marched out, their band playing "The World Turned Upside Down." For Washington, it was vindication. Years of endurance rewarded. For America, the turning point of independence. But in that moment of triumph, the field was filled with faces history forgot. French soldiers who had stormed the redoubts, black men who had dug the trenches and fought in the lines, civilians who had endured fire and hunger. They were all part of the victory march. The war did not end instantly. 2 more years passed before the Treaty of Paris. But Yorktown became the symbol, the painting, the classroom story. Washington immortalized. French sacrifices minimized. Black soldiers' names lost. Civilians overlooked. The global war reduced to a footnote. The victory was remembered, but never in full. They tell us Yorktown was Washington's great triumph. And it was. His persistence carried the revolution through its darkest days. But it was also Rochambeau's regiment storming the walls, Saint-Simon's artillery shaking the ground, Admiral de Grasse's fleet sealing the trap, the 1st Rhode Island digging trenches under fire, civilians praying for dawn, and an empire collapsing across the globe. Yorktown was never one man's victory. It was the victory of many, remembered by few. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more deleted histories, forgotten tales, strange truths. See you in the next one.